The city-county building was built in the early 1950s, and it is a direct reflection of our society at that time. For reference, the city-county was built before the historical court rulings of Brown versus the Board of Education, which ended racial segregation in public schools, and Loving v. Virginia in 1967, which case holds that state laws prohibiting interracial marriage are unconstitutional. The city-county building is doing exactly what it was designed and built to do, and that is be harsh, that is be inhumane, and be a reactionary punishment to crime. In 2022, we have a new philosophy on criminal justice reform. At this very moment, the Dane County Jail has 0 medical beds. At this very moment, the Dane County Jail has 0 mental health areas. In fact, the only areas available to house those experiencing mental health crisis or medical challenges is solitary confinement, also known as segregation. In addition, many describe these practices as inhumane and may cause more harm to those who are involved. We are only able to properly serve and protect those within our care with continued professional excellence from our Dane County Sheriff's Office deputies, staff, and volunteers. Though we continue above and beyond efforts, the configuration, design, and condition of the city-county building and the public safety building create barriers to all of our hard efforts. We are in a different era of American society. Our philosophical approach to combat crime focuses on criminal justice reform and rehabilitation of those who are incarcerated. Having a consolidated humane facility that focuses on rehabilitation through programming, life skills that are designed to ensure a safe transfer for those who are incarcerated back into our community. The reality is 97% of those who are incarcerated are coming back to our communities, to be our neighbors, to be our son-in-laws, to be our daughter-in-laws, to be our friends, and to be our employees. With our current configuration, many are released back into the community, upset, resentful, and angry after being incarcerated in an unsafe, inhumane jail facility with limited programming space and solitary confinement in place of medical beds and mental health areas. The consolidated facility will continue to house those who pose a significant threat to the public safety while respecting the rights of their victims and the survivors. Criminal justice reform calls for us to build a smaller jail facility. Indeed, this project does, as we currently have 1,013 beds, and the new facility will have 922 beds. Criminal justice reform calls for us to focus more on mental health responses to our justice-involved individuals. Indeed, this consolidation project will, as it will have 100% more mental health beds than we do right now. Criminal justice reform calls for us for appropriate medical facilities for those who are incarcerated. Indeed, this consolidated project will do that, as it will have 100% more medical beds than we currently do right now. Criminal justice reform calls for programming, recreational space, and educational areas for those who are incarcerated. Indeed, the jail consolidation project will have exercise and spiritual need areas and rooms for rehabilitative programming and in-person visitation at each housing unit. Criminal justice reform calls for us to follow evidence-based research to reduce recidivism. Indeed, we will, as the jail consolidation project will be more appropriate to implement medication-assisted treatment, MAT, for opiate-dependent individuals. We must not lose sight that our top priority is to have a safe and humane facility that is sustainable and focuses on rehabilitation. Everything else comes second to that. Resolution on Thursday, the Dane County Board has an opportunity to place humanity as their #1 priority when they vote on Resolution 320. Resolution 320 will allow us to complete the construction of a consolidated facility that was designed and approved by this very Dane County Board. This approved facility meets all of the objectives set forth by the Dane County Board, community members, and criminal justice partners, including the Dane County Sheriff's Office. More importantly, I ask, what does humanity cost to you? If it was your son, if it was your daughter, if it was your grandchild, if it was your brother, if it was your sister. We are all one wrong decision away from being incarcerated in a jail facility. And we must not forget that on Thursday night, February 17th, 2022, at the Dane County Board meeting. I am requesting all Dane County citizens contact your Dane County supervisor and share your thoughts on the importance of a safe, humane, and rehabilitative facility. My second request is for all Dane County citizens to register in support and speak your thoughts on the importance of humanity. If you've been incarcerated, if you had a friend or family member that has been incarcerated, speak your truth. Share your experience at the Dane County Board meeting Thursday night. Our goal at the Dane County Sheriff's Office is to reduce recidivism, as that can lead to a reduction in crime rates, which can lead to an increase in public safety while reducing the cost associated with our Dane County criminal justice system. It is an honor to serve as your sheriff, and I look forward to your support now and every day moving forward. I will now announce our next distinguished speaker, Dane County District Attorney Ishmael Ozanne.
Good morning. I'm Ishmael Ozanne, your Dane County District Attorney, and I stand before you to speak on this jail project in support of Sheriff Barrett for a number of reasons. Now, I believe we should only use incarceration when it is absolutely necessary. But if we are going to incarcerate somebody, it must be done humanely, it must be rehabilitative, and it must be safe. Now, we have had a lot of discussion. Sheriff Barrett, as well as his predecessor, have educated this community on the struggles they have to actually incarcerate people safely within the structures they control. I have also not heard this community talk about victims' rights as it relates to our jail structure and our criminal justice system. I agree we should be focusing on those who are actually incarcerated, their rights and their needs, but we must not lose sight of our victims. Our victims now have a right, which is outlined in our Constitution, for protection. I say that again. Our victims' rights are now outlined in our Constitution, stating their need for protection. Now, our victims are not wanting people to be incarcerated just to punish them. What most victims want is to be safe in their bodies, in their homes, and in their community. And second, to have some assurance that we are going to try to do something to change what occurred to them and ensure that it does not happen to them or someone else again in this community. You have heard from Sheriff Barrett. The conditions he must operate under do not help him ensure those wishes of our victims. Now, we have experienced record low jail numbers in population throughout this pandemic. That was because the courts were paused for about 18 months. That is because law enforcement chose not to arrest certain individuals. That is because the courts decided to release record numbers of individuals that were incarcerated, all in an attempt to control the impact of COVID. That being said, we also experienced an increase in chronic crime, in auto thefts, in gun violence, in domestic violence, and a record increase in homicides. That happened. Now, I believe that we now know better how to address and how to help rehabilitate individuals who come into the criminal justice system. And because we now know better, we must do better. This decision has been something this community has struggled with and should struggle with It is not an easy decision to make, to put valuable resources into incarceration. But with the crime that we face, there are times when incarceration is necessary. There are times when a decent jail can help divert people from prison, because a judge will have an opportunity to make a decision to keep them in the community versus send them out of the community. In the past, sheriffs have made the decisions and had to make the decision to outsource our jail housing of inmates to other counties. And our state at one point actually sent inmates all over the country. Those are decisions I don't think any community should make. I don't think it makes us safer, and I don't think it's beneficial for those individuals who are incarcerated. It's not beneficial for the community and families of those individuals, and in the end, it's not good for victims because it does nothing but just delay further victimization if we do not help someone rehabilitate themselves. Our current structures, as you heard from the sheriff, do not account for mental health issues that we know they have been dealing with for probably over a decade, and that has been increasing. They do not deal with the adequate need for programming, whether it be education or other treatment. And you just heard from the sheriff that they also do not deal with medical issues that we are seeing our inmates have within this community and every community across this country. I urge this community to support this project that we have been struggling with for years. I urge this community also to understand that this idea that these funds could be used for programming or other services is not true. These are capital funds that can only be used for structural improvement, for building a humane facility so that our sheriff can actually do what we have charged him to do, which is help reform the criminal justice system. So I urge you to support our sheriff. I urge you to communicate with your county board members, and I urge you to keep a close eye on this decision this Thursday night. This is an opportunity we have to do better. Please help us move forward and become leaders again in criminal justice system, which is what Wisconsin and Dane County have always tried to do. We created the Community Restorative Court. We are discussing a community justice center. We are trying to get in front of problems. But we cannot do that if we keep 1 or 2 feet stuck in the past in facilities that do not allow us to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, District Attorney Ishmael Ozanne. The next speaker I'd like to call is retired CEO of Journey Mental Health, Bill Grier.
Good morning. Thank you, Sheriff, for this opportunity. As a mental health professional, formerly in public service, now as a private practitioner, I spent over 30 years of my career providing direct service and supervising mental health teams in the Dane County Jail. My perspective is one of someone who worked in that environment, shared the struggles of the people incarcerated and the people trying to care for them. And so I'm in support of the initiative that the sheriff is espousing. And I want to tell you why. I'm familiar with the shortcomings of the city-county building facility. I experienced the overcrowding during the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s. I experienced the HVAC problems, the lack of appropriate, adequate facilities for monitoring suicidal individuals, and the lack of secure interview space. We often had to kneel down at the food slot to interview the people that we were working with in the facility. I believe that currently those problems persist based upon my conversations with colleagues who are still working in the jail and my conversations with Sheriff Barrett. Whenever possible during my tenure, we tried to divert acutely mentally ill people from the jail. But for others, living in close proximity to relative strangers over extended periods of time often created mental health problems in people who were previously asymptomatic. When that happened, we needed to respond efficiently and effectively. The shortcomings of the jail's infrastructure often prevented us from delivering the best clinical and custodial care. It is a tribute to the people who worked in the jail during my time and currently that more disasters in terms of mental health and physical health have not happened. The people incarcerated in the jail are the canaries in the coal mine in terms of the community's health status. From COVID to depression to addiction to trauma, their symptoms foreshadow our own. Also, I would be remiss if I did not mention that poor people and people of color are disproportionately represented in the jail population. So once again, we have an example of the hammer of neglect falling upon the usual targets. Many of us have relatives and friends who have been incarcerated. As the sheriff says, we're all only one poor decision away from being in that setting ourselves. If that happens to you or someone you care about, that is not the time to be concerned about the problems in the jail. In closing, I want to say that it's time for us to address the perennial infrastructure problems at the jail. That will require the relevant stakeholders coming together and developing a resolution that is both structural and enduring. I'm afraid that if we continue to kick this can down the road, it will explode in our faces. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grier. I would like now next to call up Allison Owens.
Good morning, everyone. It's an absolute honor and a privilege to be here today, and I'm beyond humbled. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the Dane County Sheriff, Kalvin Barrett, for asking me to speak and reminding me that my story needs to be heard. I've carried my story in silence for many years due to guilt, shame, and the stigma that's attached to being an individual who suffers from the disease of addiction and mental health concerns. I've held these traumas, legal consequences, experiences, and embarrassments on my vulnerable heart. I was using heroin at the age of 14, and I experienced my first overdose at the age of 15 years old, and I was revived by a family member. I was taken to the hospital and was encouraged to seek intensive outpatient. From the age of 14 to 21, I was consumed by my disease of addiction, using heroin intravenously. Since the age of 15, I've been in and out of numerous residential facilities, partial hospitalization programs, intensive outpatient programs, sober living, and individual psychotherapy. I've been arrested on a wide variety of charges in my past, and I've overdosed an innumerable number of times, and I was revived each time by the grace of God. The time I spent in jail was nothing short of traumatic. I can envision the physical environment and hear the lady outside of my cell on the ground, sobbing after the correctional officer screamed at her when she asked when she was going to be released. I can see her on her boat on the ground, behind the table, with bugs crawling on the floor. The poor lady was on the floor as the jail was overpopulated. I envisioned myself sobbing while visiting with my father through a monitor. The feeling of being a complete failure as a daughter consumed me when the monitor went black and we had to hang up the phone. The feeling that I would never get out of there. Every moment went by slower than molasses in February. I was fearful to open my mouth to anyone, in fear I would endure more agony. As someone who suffers from mental health issues, has a history of rape, abuse, the physical environment inside of the jail was lethal for my mental health. I was surely not going to speak up about my suicidal ideations, as I would potentially endure victimization for being in a turtle suit. With that being said, the individual that's in the back of the squad car, behind bars, in solitary confinement, or the medical pod could very well be your brother, sister, aunt, child, uncle, parent, or grandparent. Since my term in long-term sobriety, I have learned how to become a productive and useful member of society. I've been able to have positive engagements with law enforcement through my previous employer, and I successfully manage a mental health program for those suffering from depression. I also serve on the Overdose Fatality Review Board for Dane County and give back to this progressive county that strives for a change. I'm here today to share my support for a new, safer, humane, and rehabilitative jail facility. Our main intention has always been to rehabilitate, but from my experience and others shared with me, the jails have taken an unethical, inhumane, and punitive punishment on its residents within their care. Although society and its government finds it necessary to punish individuals for violating the law, or finds it necessary to make an example out of people in the community to ensure justice is being served, the practice that happens inside of those walls is found to be unnecessary. There are penalties to pay, which most of us understand, but the way we punish instead of rehabilitate should be abandoned. We should never punish someone out of anger, ego, or pride, and take a kind and considerate view on how we can be of maximum service, as that is our focus. As our Dane County Sheriff has stated before, each individual should be treated with grace, dignity, and respect as a human being. Our only aim is to keep these current and future residents safe, and for those individuals to become productive and useful members of society. We don't want to diminish the usefulness we could have on society at the micro or macro level. 278 out of 713 residents, which is about 39% of the resident population, was suffering with mental health when this data was received a few weeks ago. That 39% could potentially be significantly higher, as many members of our community don't have access to mental health care. They've never seen a practitioner or a medical professional, or don't speak about mental health in fear of judgment or cultural beliefs. Jails and solitary confinement are diminishing its residents' mental health. Solitary confinement can only lead to severe mental health concerns, and it can cause permanent or semi-permanent changes to the brain physiology in a short time span. These residents are at a higher risk of self-harm, suicide attempts, violence, and victimization. The lack of capacity within the mental health system, a lack of coordinated care, and a lack of case management is why individuals continue to be reincarcerated. I believe that we have come to accept and embrace that our deputies' roles have changed from simply housing residents to working more as treatment providers and public safety guardians. To my next point, focusing on health and mental health beds and finding a common ground. There should be trained mental health professionals working closely with these individuals in crisis or suffering from mental or physical health complications. Having this can take the pressure off the deputies to provide care if a resident is in psychosis or whatever have you. If this is not feasible, we can get the necessary training for these deputies to provide the best resident-focused care. I personally believe that it would be best for our jail to hire of medical psychologists to get more accurate mental health diagnosis, better individualized treatment plans, and potentially reduce the number of pharmaceuticals needed within the jail. There are studies done that show hiring a medical psychologist can be vital to the jail by the following: saving money for mental health care with prescriptions, more residents participating in diversion programs, and decreasing the amount of violence occurring between staff and residents and resident on residents. My last point, as I touched on earlier, is that the psychologist can help release some of the pressure on the deputies psychologically. We shouldn't be overlooking the staff and the physical environment as a way of therapeutic measures. If the staff is meant to help, but the environment creates harm, then the experience can be iatrogenic for its residents. With the lack of secure mental health beds nationally, this is why it's vital to have a safe and humane space to rehabilitate our brothers and sisters, which we can do following through with the jail consolidation project. We can enhance mental health services within the jails to minimize risk and improve care. Each resident should be getting out of their cells, being offered ways to participate in their own recovery and rehabilitation through individualized treatment programs. It has been said before, studies have shown that in resident participation, education, vocational, and job training, work skill development, drug abuse, mental health, and all other treatment programs all reduce recidivism significantly. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Owens. Next, I would like to call up Deputy Brian Tischer and Deputy Jim Brigham.
Thank you, Sheriff Barrett. So I'm here today to speak on behalf of the over 380 members of the Dane County Deputy Sheriff's Association, all brave men and women who have or are now working in the Dane County Jail. I'm not here to ask for a better facility for my members. I'm here to ask for a better facility for those who are residents in that facility. I'm asking that because the natural result of that is a better work environment. When residents find themselves not stressed, not victims of further crime, my members don't have to deal with the results of that. Therefore, we're asking for a safe facility, one that's safe for our members to work in, and one that's safe for the residents who find themselves there. We're asking for a facility that takes into account that many residents only have a support system here locally. And if we cut them off from in-person visitation, they lose that support system. We're here to ask for appropriate facilities for medical and the mental health needs of the residents in our jail. We're here to ask for a facility that provides access and opportunity to programming so that when residents leave, they can succeed in our community. If the jail consolidation project is reduced or eliminated due to lack of funds, it will make for a less safe and more stressful jail, not only for our members, but for the residents confined therein. I'm asking that the county board and every county resident please uphold the values of Dane County and make a commitment to a facility that is safe and humane, but also one that provides opportunities for those who find themselves there to later succeed when they re-enter the community. Please support Resolution 320. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Tischer. I will now take a few questions in regards to this matter before we conclude this press conference.
Sheriff, you've said to people, or I've told you, you've said to some folks that the specific case of Jimmy Joshua is a good case to me for this project. Can you say specifically what would have gone differently in that case, a different facility or a better facility?
Well, ultimately, all residents of the Dane County Jail receive the best care that we have and that is provided for them. We are one of the few facilities in the state of Wisconsin that have 24/7 medical staff. And if there's any emergencies that will require a resident to leave due to their medical condition, we will not hesitate in transporting them to the hospital. Thank you for your question.
That's not what happened though. He was left in a room for 15 hours by himself. How would the new facility change that situation?
The new facility provides us with beds and medical areas to provide better medical attention for all that are within our care. Thank you, sir.
I've been kind of covering this for 10 years at least, and when sort of same cycle happens, project comes up, goes before the board, folks come, say we don't want a jail at all, county board punts it 2 years down the road. How do you get out and sort of in front of that? Is that with this press conferences? I mean, how do you sort of avoid getting caught in this cycle that we've seen now for years and years?
Absolutely. Well, at this point, if you look to my left and right, we're surrounded by members of our criminal justice system, our community leaders, not only in the mental health field, but also those who have been involved in the criminal justice system. Their voices matter, their perspectives matter, and that's why we're here to present that to the community so that we can make an informed decision Thursday night in regards to the importance of a safe, humane, and rehabilitative facility. Thank you for your question.
The slogan that's going to be thrown around all over the place is invest in communities, not in prisons. What is your response to that, and how can you, I guess, retort to that argument?
Right, well, it really comes down to investing. The residents of the Dane County Jail are in our community. They come from our community and they return to our community. So by investing in our residents, we are now investing in our community. Thank you so much for your question. Thank you for your time. If you have additional questions, you can send those to you or send those to us, and we will follow up at this time.
Sure, we do
Thank
have
you.
additional questions, but one before you leave. In October, there was an officer-involved shooting involving Deputy Boards Rodriguez. She was fired 2 weeks later. What happened in Cross Plains, Sheriff, and why was she let go?